October 28, 1950. Frieda Langer slips on a wet stone in a Vermont stream, and cold water floods her boots. She is 53 years old, an experienced hiker who knows these woods near Somerset better than most. A survivor, someone who has walked the long trail's ridges for years. Her companion, her cousin Herbert, stands on the far bank watching her wring out her soaked clothes. It is a minor inconvenience. A change of socks, a quick walk back to the cabin, nothing more. But pause here, because this small moment is the hinge everything else swings on. 16 days earlier, on October 12, 1950, a young boy named Paul Jepson had vanished from this same stretch of forest. Now, the pattern was tightening. Frieda tells Herbert she is going back to change into dry clothes. She will take a shortcut through the trees and meet him further along the trail. He nods. There is no reason to worry. What happened between that nod and the moment Herbert returned to the cabin alone is the core of one of America's most haunting unsolved cases. The woman who knew these woods better than anyone was simply gone. No sound, no cry for help, no trace. Here is the surface story, the one that grew into legend. A hiker takes a wrong turn, gets lost, and the forest swallows her. But the record shows something more curious, because Frieda Langer became the only person ever recovered from the Bennington Triangle, and her body raised more questions than it answered. The official record, compiled by local historians and preserved in the Bennington Triangle archives, gives us the hard dates. Disappeared October 28, 1950. Body found May 12, 1951. 7 months apart, the forest holding its secret across an entire Vermont winter. When nearly 300 volunteers descended on those woods, they brought bloodhounds and grid searches and the desperate hope of a family. They combed the terrain near Somerset Reservoir. They called her name into the cold autumn air. Day after day, they found nothing. No footprints, no torn clothing, no sign that Frieda Langer had ever walked those paths. 300 volunteers, grid searches, bloodhounds, and no sign. That silence holds a question most reports skip. Stay on this case as we examine what the search left unanswered. In the comments, write "The file stays open" if you've ever felt that an official search missed something crucial. That is the part that should stop you cold. Because when her remains were finally discovered, they lay 3.5 miles southeast of the campsite, on the shore of the eastern branch of the Deerfield River. An area that had been, according to the records, only lightly searched previously. Lightly searched. Which means searchers had walked near that shore in those first critical weeks and somehow missed what would later be found. The condition of the body made everything worse. Months of exposure had left the remains skeletal, too far gone for any definitive examination. The cause of death was never determined. No injuries, no signs of violence, no evidence of animal attack. Just a woman who vanished in minutes and reappeared months later with no explanation attached. If you have ever walked a trail and felt the quiet press of the forest around you, you know how quickly a familiar path can become a stranger's. That is the feeling at the heart of this case. The woman who knew these woods best could not find her way back from a shortcut. And the only concrete piece of evidence we have is a body that answers nothing. But that wasn't the real mistake. The real mistake was assuming she took a wrong turn at all. This is the part most people miss. Frieda Langer did not wander deep into the wilderness. She was within a few hundred yards of the family cabin when she turned back. She was a skilled hunter, a woman accustomed to navigating dense terrain. The simplest explanation, that she became disoriented, collapses under the weight of her experience. So, what happened in those final minutes? The search effort was massive. Nearly 300 volunteers, bloodhounds, helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft. They swept the forest systematically for weeks. They found absolutely nothing. And then, 7 months later, her remains appeared in a lightly searched zone. Remember that stream in October? The water had already set the stage. She slipped, fell, soaked her clothing. That was the documented incident that triggered everything else. The decision to change clothes. The shortcut. The disappearance. Every detail verified, every step leading toward a vanishing that defies the simple answers. Here is what nobody noticed at the time. Frieda Langer was not alone in her vanishing. The Bennington Triangle had already claimed 5 people in 5 years. Mitty Rivers in 1945, Paula Weldon in 1946, James Tedford in 1949, Paul Jepson just 16 days before Frieda. 4 of them never found. Only Frieda's body ever surfaced. 5 people vanished. 1 body returned. That contradiction is the detail that keeps this file propped open. If you want to stay on this case as we go deeper into what the recovery actually reveals, now is the time to follow the file. In the comments, write "the file stays open." If you believe Frieda's remains are the key, the one physical piece that doesn't fit the simple lost hiker story, stay on this case. That single recovered body is the contradiction that cracks the legend wide open. Because the one case where we have physical evidence is the one that refuses to fit the narrative of a simple lost hiker. She was too experienced. She was too close to safety. She was found in a place that had already been searched. The myth says the Bennington Triangle is a place where people vanish without a trace. But Frieda Langer proves that even when the forest returns a body, the truth stays buried. The official account never conceded uncertainty. The cause of death remains undetermined to this day. Think about what that means. Her body was found 3.5 miles from where she disappeared, a distance that should have been covered in under 2 hours of walking, 7 months after she vanished, in an area the searchers had passed through lightly. If you are the investigator looking at that file, you have no clean answer to offer. Some point to a killer active in the Vermont woods in that period. Others whisper about the Native American legends that deemed this land cursed. Still others wonder about disorientation, hypothermia, an accident hidden by the forest. But the verified facts refuse to cooperate with any single theory. Here is what the record actually supports. Frieda Langer slipped into a stream on October 28, 1950. She separated from her companion to change her clothes. She was never seen alive again. Her remains were recovered on May 12, 1951, on the shore of the eastern branch of the Deerfield River. The cause of death was not determined because of the condition of the remains. She is the only recovered victim of the Bennington Triangle. The silence around that file is the loudest sound in this case, because when the search ended and the body was returned and the cause of death was marked undetermined, the case simply closed. No further investigation, no deeper questions. The forest had given back its only body, and that was somehow meant to be enough. But then, look at the terrain again. The river cuts through Somerset with a cold, deliberate current. The eastern branch, where she was found, runs through territory that should have been searched during those first 2 weeks. She could not have walked there injured. She could not have crawled there unnoticed. The timeline alone makes no sense. Now, watch what happens when you stack the facts. Experienced hiker, 53 years old, disappears within minutes of her cabin, found months later in a lightly searched area. Cause of death never established. The only recovered body in a cluster of 5 vanishings. Here is the quiet revelation that recontextualizes everything. Frieda Langer is not the case that solved the Bennington Triangle. She is the case that makes it a genuine mystery. Her discovery answered almost nothing. Instead, it proved that even when the forest gives back its dead, the truth can remain as hidden as the missing. 4 others never came home at all. The one woman who did come home, in a manner of speaking, carried no explanation with her. If her death had been an accident, the evidence would have been there. A broken bone from the fall, signs of exposure, some trace of struggle against the cold. The remains showed nothing. The cause of death was a blank space on the form, and that blank space is where every theory rushes in to fill the void, the shortcut that led nowhere. That is the phrase that haunts this case. Frieda Langer made one decision, one logical choice to walk back and change her soaked clothes. She took a path she knew, in woods she had navigated countless times, and the forest closed around her. No witness, no sound, no trace. In the final accounting, the Bennington Triangle stands as a riddle with no key. 5 disappearances between 1945 and 1950. 1 body recovered. 1 cause of death undetermined. 1 experienced hiker who knows these woods better than anyone, lost within sight of safety. The blank space on Frieda Langer's death certificate is the kind of detail that keeps a file open for decades. When the forest gives back its dead without explanation, the questions only multiply. If you want to stay on this case as we trace what happened after 1950, the theories that emerged, the investigators who kept digging, the pattern that some say extends beyond Vermont, the next file is already waiting. In the comments, type "The file stays open" if you believe the Bennington Triangle isn't a closed chapter. The river still cuts through Somerset, carrying the same cold water that washed over a missing woman's clothes that October morning. And somewhere in its current, the answer still drifts, untethered. Frieda Langer's story reminds us that experience is not a guarantee, that the familiar can become foreign in an instant, that sometimes, even when we find the body, we never find the truth. The deer have returned to the riverbank where her remains were found. The trail she walked that morning has grown over, but the cabin still stands. A quiet marker of a day that began like any other and ended in a question no file has ever answered. 70 years of autumns have passed through these woods since Frieda Langer walked back toward that cabin. Each October brings the same cold snap, the same wet leaves underfoot, the same chance that someone will step off a familiar path and into a silence that does not let go. But the forest keeps its arithmetic in its own way. 4 bodies still missing from these 5 years of vanishings. 1 recovered, 1 unresolved, 1 inexplicable. The balance of that equation has never shifted, and no theory has ever balanced it cleanly. What remains, when the myths are stripped away, is a single documented truth. A woman slipped on a wet stone, went back to change her clothes, and vanished from the face of the known earth. The forest returned her months later, but it never returned the explanation. That is the real weight of the Bennington Triangle. Not the legend, not the folklore, not the whispers of cursed ground. Just the quiet, stubborn fact that a life can be interrupted in the space between one step and the next, and the world will file it away unanswered. Frieda Langer's name is still printed in the record with a question mark beside it. That is the only honest ending this case has ever offered. The river still runs past the shore where she was found, and the woods still hold the silence of 4 who never came back. The truth, whatever it is, has had 70 years to surface and has chosen to stay hidden.